landing a great job opportunity is sometimes very challenging. Breaking into tech and getting hired as a sales rep can be even harder. When I was applying to my first sales jobs, I also struggled with the unknown, what to expect, what the tech industry was like, and how do I break in? After years of being an SDR myself, I've decided to build something I wish I had in the beginning. My name is Stefan, and in the SDR Hire podcast, I interview successful SDRs and salespeople who share their stories straight from the trenches. Learn how they got their first job offers, how they succeed every day in their roles, and what makes them stand out in their organizations. We all have what it takes. We just need someone to remind us of the opportunity and give us a better chance for success. Let's get your next SDR gig. Welcome to another episode of the SDR Hire podcast. Today, I'm joined with Kevin Hollingsworth. So Kevin started his career in SaaS back in January 2020. He spent about 18 months as an SDR at Khoros before getting promoted to an account executive. And then recently, he made the move to join Braze again as an AE. His focus is on staying consistent and using processes and systems to scale his time effectively. Kevin, glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. It's a great opportunity, and I'm excited to just dive into some of the details with you.
That sounds great. So I like to kick off these sessions with just, what is your story and what brought you into the SDR world?
Yeah, so I didn't even know what an SDR was when I was applying for that role. Like I was fortunate enough to, so my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she worked in tech. And so that was, I had a view into the technology world that I think a lot of people don't have. But even beyond that too, I wanted to learn how to sell. I thought that would be a valuable life skill. I didn't really know what I wanted to do and said, you know what, making cold calls and selling to people sounds like a good thing to learn and get uncomfortable. So I set out just applying to, mass applying to a bunch of places, and eventually got a call from Khoros to come interview. And I didn't fully understand what their technology did. I had really, looking back, I had no idea what I was walking into, but I think it turned out to be great. I had some sales experience in my past. Turns out the SDR role is very different because the sales experience I had was face-to-face conversation, whereas the SDR is much more of you put in all this effort by yourself in hopes to get one response back. So I think it was an interesting enlightenment process to get hired as an SDR and to really figure out what that job is.
Guys, and what did your interview process, if you remember, look like back at Khoros? Because you mentioned you applied to a bunch of companies, and then, what was different with Khoros?
Yeah, so I think there was, the interview process for me was relatively standard. It was one, a call with the recruiter as a screening call. Did I pass some of the initial screening of hey, do we want to move to next steps with this guy? I had passed that. And then one thing that I actually did like about the interview process is it was, I think 4 interviews, but it was all done in a 2-hour time span. So it was 3 or 4 half-an-hour interviews with different people. So I got to meet the different managers, and they just kind of had 2 people in the room, would leave, and 2 new people would come in, and they each conducted their own interview. So at least it didn't take, weeks of time for me to, okay, did I make it to the next stage? Great. So I really appreciated that. I think that was really valuable. And what I did in my interview process was I scoped out everyone's LinkedIn profile. I, saw that one of the managers had run her own company for a little while. I had seen that 2 people came from the same company. So I used that information to ask personal questions towards when it's my turn to ask questions. I hadn't really had a full career yet, so I don't really know what I'm doing. They're not interviewing me on my business acumen at this time. They're interviewing me as is this guy coachable? Is this guy trainable? Can we help teach him the skills that he's going to need to be successful? They weren't seeing if I had the skills already. And I think that's a good distinction to acknowledge, that SDR is quote unquote a entry level position. They're not necessarily evaluating you on do you have all the skills to be successful from day one. It's like, do you seem like someone that we can help teach the skills to? And so I appreciated that process. I got the offer, and then we had like a boot camp, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks where we got to learn some of the processes and trainings, and that was helpful. And I felt like I was doing well. And then day one seat, I felt like a chicken with my head cut off. I had no idea what I was doing.
That sounds really exciting, and it sounds actually like it's a bit different process than what I've heard so far, especially considering that you had like 2-hour drilling from like 5 to 10 different people. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, it wasn't really like a 2 or 3 week process. It was really done fairly quickly. And I think that you really mentioned something that is a secret weapon for everybody that doesn't really have the experience, as you mentioned, which is prepare those questions up front. Like that's your way in, because the way you ask those questions is going to be the way you'll be asking questions to your prospects tomorrow. And a good manager is going to recognize that. And so probably in your case, that was also what happened, because you basically did some, personalized prospecting, or rather prospecting, that helped you personalize your questions, and it made all the difference.
Yeah, it makes a big, I wish that's something that I would have done a little bit more of now, like just of, there's even steps that you can go beyond just looking at the interviewers' profiles. Hey, who are some SDRs that currently work at the company? Message them on LinkedIn, say, hey, I'm interviewing for the role. Most of the time, everyone's going to be super helpful and say, hey, here are some things to know about. Hey, I'm interviewing with X, Y, and Z manager. Can you let me know anything about them? Oh, this person. And then, the people who work there can let you know, oh, this is the questions they like to ask, or some of the inside information that makes, when you show up at that interview, it makes the world of difference. If you can just say 2 or 3, even just words that are commonplace in that SDR team that you don't say outside of that. So it's a clear signal. Okay, this person's done their homework. They know how to prospect because they've talked to my team already to get information prior to this call.
Right. That's for sure. I often post on LinkedIn and hope to get people to, learn about those processes and actually implement them in their own. And as I recall, you're also pretty active on LinkedIn yourself. Like, what's that about? Like, is there a specific strategy that you implement, prospecting on LinkedIn, or are you just being out there and just, telling people all your tips and tricks?
So LinkedIn, I'm still like figuring out LinkedIn. I think it's been really interesting.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. So I think for the first 2 years, I used LinkedIn the traditional way. I consumed content. I would send friend requests or connection requests to prospects. I would send a really bad pitch after they connected, and they would never answer me. I would send in-mails and they'd rarely answer me. Like, to me, LinkedIn was never really a prosperous channel for me. I think I maybe booked 1 meeting in almost 2 years on LinkedIn. Whereas recently now I've kind of shifted towards like posting content and sharing content on trying to help other SDRs and AEs kind of, where not make the same mistakes I have. And it's just been really interesting to see a shift from trying to start a conversation, but when I was prospecting, it was always about like, how can I get this person to take a meeting? Like that's my goal, versus now I'm posting on there and I'm like, hey, let's set up 30 minutes just to like meet you as a person. Who are you? Let's network. Let's have a conversation about things you're interested in. Someone engages on my post and we have a 2-way conversation. And now I'm having a lot of, CROs and VPs of sales and things like that reach out to me to start conversations. And it's a totally different experience. And I think it's been really cool to do that. And I think on a more personal note, like my wife is also posting on LinkedIn. I think it's been really cool for us to help each other out and advocate and grow. And we're both meeting new people, and it's turned into this really cool experience that I never would have even imagined. Like, posting on LinkedIn led us to this conversation. I didn't have any expectations towards joining a podcast.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I know that LinkedIn has been doing, magic for me and my own brand and whatever I'm doing. And obviously this is how I came across your profile, and like I have a feeling as if I know you to an extent without even sharing a screen with you. And so I think that really creates a better environment where you basically put yourself out there and let others approach, rather than just pitching cold, which is awesome. But you mentioned something that really caught my attention, which is you and your wife really sound like a great like tag team. Do you guys have like a joint strategy of some sort? So like how do you guys try to approach LinkedIn or whatever you guys are doing?
Yeah, so my wife, she's really my secret weapon in every category. I feel like she, from day one, she like I said, was already in tech when I started, and she's worked really hard. She's really good at what she does, and I think she's been really helpful to help like ask me questions, to think about things differently. She's big on process and systems, and helped me see the value in what adopting those processes and systems can really do. And I think from a LinkedIn perspective, like she has her own coaching business that's doing great, and she has a ton of good information. I think it was great to see that other people are posting on LinkedIn to help build their brand. And I started posting and was like, hey, what do you think about doing this? And then so she started doing it, and then she started posting every day, and I was like, well, wow, okay, maybe I'll post every day. So it was kind of like a helping each other out. And we'll do some like proofreading of messages, things like that, or like help with some punchiness. It's still a work in progress, but it's really fun.
Amazing. I really love hearing those, kind of family tag team stories where you guys are helping each other out. I know there's more than a few like marriage couples like crushing it on LinkedIn and just sharing content and helping each other out, which is pretty awesome. But I think we kind of drifted away from the initial kind of talk track, which is, you started off as an SDR, and what happened next? Like you landed the job. Like first day was hell, but like did you get a chance to become better? And how did that look like? And what were the next steps?
Yeah, so the first several months of my SDR career were really tough. I mean, I think I booked one meeting in the first 3 months, which is really demoralizing. It has an emotional toll on you too. Like, I'm
For
starting to
sure.
question, am I good at sales? Should I even be in this role? Like maybe I made the wrong decision. So a lot of that talk track comes in. And I think the one thing I try to do is just learn a little bit every day. I'm a big believer in like 1% growth every day. And I think if you can just, like I think Josh Braun was really helpful to follow on LinkedIn as an SDR, for how to think about messaging and how to learn how to just prospect better. And I think by listening to these people's advice and then trying it out and sometimes seeing success, sometimes not, there was just always a constant drive within me to like grow a little bit. But the what I didn't realize is the gap between when I learned something and then when you see the results from that learning can be sometimes pretty wide. And so I'm putting in a lot of effort to try and learn and grow, and I'm reading sales books, watching YouTube videos, I'm listening to podcasts, and always trying to find different ways to supplement the information that I'm getting outside of what the company provides me. And, after maybe about 4 or 5 months, I started to see, okay, here's like a big blip in like my numbers, like going up. I was like, okay, great. And then I started getting more consistent at that higher level. And then really after about a year of SDRing was when everything really shifted. And I needed to, I was trying to go to get promoted to a senior SDR, and my director was like, hey, you're doing all the right things. You're asking questions in meetings, you're speaking up as a leader, you're coaching other SDRs, but like your numbers need to be a little bit higher in order to make this promotion make sense. So I had to really
Up your
sit
game.
back and reevaluate, what am I doing? Where am I spending my time? So I didn't send any messages for a week. I just like rewrote all my sequences. I rewrote how I was going to approach prospecting, and then I just went all in. And then, that next month I was at 300%, and then the next month after that I was at 300%, and the next month after that I was like 300%. It was like a totally different shift. And then there was like excitement and enjoyment from doing well in the job. But it took, like I talk about that lagging success. I was constantly learning and growing, trying to feed myself information every day. And it was really only after like about a year of consistently doing that like that huge growth really started to affect like, the commission checks that I was taking home.
Wow. Wow. Awesome. And did you ever get in trouble with the company because of, that initial lack of results? I think because that's a very big fear for a lot of
Yeah.
reps, myself included. Back when I was an SDR, it was like, if I don't hit my goals, like, am I going to get fired? Am I get, uh, performance improvement programs, all of that good stuff? Like, how did that look like for you?
Yeah. So that was always on my mind. I was, I had 0 meetings my first month, but I knew that there was, at least it's my first month. Okay. Second month, I got 1 right towards the end of the month. And the third month, I'm at 0. So I'm like, oh man, this is not going well. And my
I can imagine.
manager was not exactly supportive of me in that situation. I think the way that he went about it was less than ideal, kind of being like, hey man, we can't have another goose egg this month. You really need a bump. It's like, versus like more of a fear-based approach versus a support. Hey, let's sit down and work with you one-on-one to figure out where you're missing, where I can help. And so I never got formally put on a PIP or a performance improvement plan, but I was pretty close. Definitely in the beginning, and then sort of towards the middle too. I think there was always just enough of a couple months in a row where I was doing well to like 1 or 2 months off until, so there wasn't enough of like a continuous poor route to be on a performance plan, but it was there. It was definitely, like we had structures in place for like what would qualify as a performance plan. And so I was worried about it, but I think you just try and focus on what you can control and focus on going to book meetings rather than like how many meetings you don't have.
For sure, for sure. And, I mean, this is really inspiring to hear because, you really been through that hell. You felt that pressure and you persevered. You went through it, you found a way to do it. Maybe you can share a bit, like, what were those changes that you made that actually helped you, get to those 300? And like, I can assume, you were listening, like I can assume that all of that compound knowledge that just built upon itself, podcast after podcast, like great LinkedIn post after great LinkedIn post, book after book. I can assume it built up to an extent to the level where it just clicked in one place and booked you 300%. Like that's an awesome number.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest thing came from when it was actually the most valuable information that I learned that helped me the most in my SDR career was independent of my company. So a lot of people talk about, well, if you know the product well, if you know the product space well, that'll be really helpful. I found that like particularly, and I think a lot of SDRs will resonate with this is like their first career. So there's not a lot of business acumen. There's not a lot of understanding of what a VP really cares about because they haven't talked to any VPs in the real world yet. They don't get time with their own VP. So it's, what are the things pressing on them? What does a CRO care about? What do the directors care about? What does enablement care about? What does marketing care about? Like all of these different, buzzwords of organizations, so by sitting down and trying to understand what I could about business, how businesses make money, what inefficiencies exist in business, those things were really helpful for me because once I started to understand how a business operates, when I look at people that I'm prospecting and I look at the products that I sell, I can then go, well, here I have this general understanding how businesses work. I'm looking at this business and they have this problem. Oh, that matches directly to this part of the solution that I sell versus like, hey, I've got this solution that I'm supposed to sell. You're my ideal prospect, so I'm going to send you some emails because you fit the bill. It's reframing from. So I would spend time setting up one-on-ones with my AEs and talking back and forth, having workshop sessions. We talk about closed won deals that they just had, We talk about demos that they had recently where a prospect leaned forward and said, whoa, that was really cool. Those are gold. Try and find what those little moments are, because when a prospect leans forward on a demo and says, wow, this is blowing my mind, it doesn't matter how many times marketing has told you to care about something. It's like that person cares like deeply about what you just showed them. That is your answer right there. Figure out what it is that they cared about, take that, and then determine, is this a problem that expands beyond just this company? So an example I have is, this thing happened. I was talking to my AE, and he was, in a deal with a large bank, huge US bank. And some of the software that we sold was about digital communication. So communicating with people on Twitter and Facebook and social media. And there was a little link that you could drop to open up a brand messenger. So it would be then secure. So when someone reaches out on social media and you talk to a bank, the first thing they have to do is confirm your identity. And you can't do that on social media. So this was a way that banks could do that. And the user still has a great experience, because it's basically, I'm still continuing my Twitter DMs. And so we found this, and the prospect leaned forward. She was, this is blowing my mind. I didn't know this was possible. And so we kind of had another couple conversations before we were just like, is this an industry problem? Did we just stumble upon something that and then I went to my list, and I had about 45 different financial service companies on my list. And research then became so easy, because I understood a problem they had, and I was looking to see if this business had that problem. If they did, great, I'll prospect them. If they don't, I don't care about them right now. And so I was able to take one email, go to a company's Twitter, screenshot a Twitter where they're saying, call us back, put it in an email, and send that out to 45 companies in 1 week. And it booked me a bunch of meetings, because it was really relevant to this industry. We solved a problem, and I went so specific on solving that problem. Our platform could do so many different things, and this was one tiny piece. But the whole purpose is to get really granular on one tiny problem that you solve that is a nuisance for this person.
Wow.
So lead with that problem. And then the personalization aspect of you don't really need to read their LinkedIn as much, because if you just insert yourself in and say, I clearly understand this problem that you have their attention, because it is personalized, because you're solving their day-to-day problem. And so that was just a way to really operationalize. And suddenly I could prospect 45 accounts in 1 week versus 45 accounts in a quarter.
Wow.
And it upped the quantity of messaging I was sending. It upped the quality of messaging that I was sending. And I would spend, then the next week meeting with my AEs, talking about a different industry, retail. What are problems that retail has? What are demos that retail people have? What can we do? What messaging can we, span across this whole industry, and start to really, really hone in on problems? Because once you identify a problem, it's so easy to reach out to someone, because you feel so confident.
Yeah, that's right.
Look, I know I'm going to solve this problem for you. I know you have this problem. I'm in your inbox for a good reason, versus I'm supposed to send emails. So I'm supposed to prospect, so I'm in your inbox.
Wow.
It comes across in the way that you message.
No, pure gold. And for example, this is something I wish I've had in front of myself as an example when I was starting, because this really shows what it means actually to do, proper sales, proper discovery, proper prospecting. And it just takes a while. And I mean, no wonder you got promoted to senior, and I'm assuming very quickly after the AE role came by.
Yeah, there was a minimum time in seat, but that once I hit that, it was.
Yeah, there we go. And so, if I understood correctly, your SDR journey wasn't really that long.
I think it was in all, it was I think 20 months. So close to 2 years, not quite. But I mean, it was definitely, there was times that it felt like, it was a grind, there's months where you're doing well and you feel great. And then you're right back at zero at the beginning of next month, and you got to start all over again. And it can be an emotional roller coaster for sure.
Gotcha. So I'm curious. You changed your role to, or rather, you changed your company to, you joined Braze, if I'm pronouncing correctly, right?
That's correct.
That's your current company. Awesome. And so, what did the AE interview look like in comparison to the SDR interview? Like, is there any difference? Like, is there something you would kind of pinpoint there?
Yeah. So going back to what I had suggested people do for the SDR interview, which is prospect into the organization and get inside information. So I did that in this interview. So I reached out to a bunch of the AEs who were on the SMB team and said, hey, I'm interviewing for this role. Love to just learn a little bit about the company, your experience, what that's like, who the hiring managers are, and so these became, I think I reached out to maybe like 12 people and 2 responded. Which, hey, I only needed two people to respond because they gave me good information. But the interview itself was definitely different. It was, I appreciated that it started off as just a character interview. Like you said, hey, let's leave work at the door. Just tell me about your life, experiences. And my VP, who I interviewed, who I really like and vibe with, he was just looking for someone that had been through struggle, and that can manifest in a million different ways. And most human beings have all dealt with struggle.
Sure.
So it's just trying to figure out what that was like. And I appreciated that approach. And then it moved into the main interview was like a mock discovery call. So you go through that and you ask questions. And then it was, talk about a time where you bought a product, then talk about the values that you associated in the buying process. And so it was interesting because, think from a buyer's perspective. And for that mock discovery call, I had asked some of the AEs that I connected with, hey, I've got this mock discovery call. Like, what are some questions that you would ask on a disco call? And so they sent me a list of questions that right from their list. And I just asked those questions in the interview. And it was like, I had been working there for 5 months because I was, asking detailed questions to follow up on and expanding the use case and getting different buy-in. And I think that was really helpful to ask those questions to the other teammates, because it just shows, I know how to prospect. I know how to set up for a call. I know how to gather information in preparation for a call, which is everything that sales is.
That's a really, really cool story, especially because you actually implemented something that you suggest other people do, which it gives you a certain level of authority in the field. And because I'm just saying, there's a lot of advice out there, but when it comes from somebody who actually did it and was successful with it, it really creates another layer of trust there. So thank you for sharing that with the audience. We're close to finishing. So what would you say would be your next steps career wise, since you kind of took all the milestones, like from SDR, enterprise SDR, or rather senior one, and then an AE, and then another AE role? Like, what's next?
So what's next for me is I am at a place where I want to get a lot of experience. So that was part of what led me to move to Braze. I wanted a role that was going to give me more at bats than I was getting in my previous company. I learned by doing. I learned by like just taking calls, having a full schedule, messing up, and going from there. And I think the products that I'm selling now are more conducive to that higher repetition. And I think I'm comfortable taking a smaller deal size at this company than I was working at my last company, because I get that repetition. I get to learn those sales skills. I get to learn how to sell, how to really be how to close, get into enough of those situations where I then have opinions. I then have a process that I follow, develop that process. I don't know what that's going to look like. That'll just be a build as I go, and reevaluate. But I think that's what I was looking for. So what's next on my list is to spend the next year just selling, working on my skills, honing those skills, and then who knows what's going to happen from there. If I feel really good about Braze, continue to move up the ladder here. If there's other opportunities to show up, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but my main goal right now is to learn as much as I possibly can about how to sell and kind of develop my own style.
That's an awesome plan, because it doesn't necessarily have to mean you have to have a plan and you know where you're going to be in year 2, 3, 5, 10, as long as you know what the journey is going to be, obviously, in which direction at least, which is pretty cool. Okay, so for the end of the session, what is something that you would suggest, other than all of these awesome tips that you gave to our audience? Like, is there something specific you would tell somebody trying to become an SDR, something that we can kind of recap with?
So someone who's trying to be an SDR but is not right now, some advice for them?
Yeah, let's put it like that.
Okay. I think there's so much information out there that is at your fingertips that you can get before you're ever in an SDR role, that can teach you how to be an SDR. And I think if you show some of that, if you show some of those skills that an SDR has, prospecting into an organization during an interview process, or to get an interview, I think that's huge, because it shows so many things at once. It shows, 1, you know how to prospect. It shows 2, you take initiative. 3, you go after what you want. You create opportunity. You don't wait for opportunity to come to you. And then there's trust from the hiring manager that, hey, I've seen your skills in action. It's not just based off of an interview, because interviews are helpful, but you never really know how things are going to land until someone's doing it. And I think when you can, if you're thinking about being an SDR, if you are trying to be an SDR, there are so many good resources out there on LinkedIn, to even just podcasts out there about, what does it look like to prospect? What are different strategies around it, and familiarize yourself with the industry and the terms. And then if you're at a company and you want to make a switch, start prospecting into a new company to create an opportunity. That confidence can come across as confidence, not arrogance, if you show investment.
I love that right there. Awesome. This was great. I feel like we could really keep talking for the next couple of hours, but I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with the audience, and I've enjoyed our conversations as well. So Kevin, I appreciate your time very much, and I'll see you around. And thank you for being a guest on the SDR Hire Show.
Oh man, this has been awesome, Stefan. It's great to talk to you again, and thanks for having me as a guest.
Thank you for tuning in to the SDR Hire Podcast, the only podcast exclusively focused on SDRs, where successful salespeople share about their hiring stories and sales adventures straight from the trenches. If you found this useful, go ahead and share it with someone else you know is trying to break into tech or land their next SDR gig. You can find SDR Hire on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and catch you in the next episode.